Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Progress America Unfiltered. This is Rhett, back with Linda. And Linda, you know what? We were just talking about a few weeks ago how it's been so long since we had a one-on-one show. We had the one a few weeks ago, and now here we are again for some Linda Rhett coverage. And you know what? I'm absolutely here for this. Linda, I always love talking to you because you always just tell me like it is. And with the debt ceiling discussions, which we're going to get into today, I really want to hear from you, why some Democrats are split over this decision, what the big deal was about this, and what was avoided ahead of the June 5th deadline. Linda, what is going on with this debt ceiling discussion?
Yeah, excited to be doing another one-on-one show, Rhett. So the House just yesterday passed a debt ceiling deal that Joe Biden and Kevin McCarthy came to over the holiday Memorial weekend. And this deal, it has a lot of components, but some of them is that it'll freeze spending on a lot of government programs for the next 2 years, which is effectively a cut in inflation-adjusted terms. It's going to take away some of the extra money that Biden had gotten last year for the IRS to collect taxes from rich tax cheats. It approves a pipeline that Joe Manchin has been pushing for, and it tightens work requirements for some recipients of SNAP, which is a program better known as food stamps, although it also loosens restrictions for some others. And so most of the provisions in this deal are not particularly good. There are vital programs that are going to effectively be cut in inflation-adjusted terms by having their spending frozen for the next 2 years. But these are also much smaller cuts than the ones that were in the MAGA Default on America Act that Republicans passed about a month ago. And so this is certainly not a case of Kevin McCarthy and his caucus getting everything that they want. And in fact, a lot of what happened in this deal would have probably happened in the annual appropriations process that takes place in the fall, which means that Republicans were effectively holding the global economy hostage for almost no reason. Like, for them, it turns out that it was almost doing the economic terrorism that was the point more than the outcome that they get from it.
Totally. It's like just stirring up the same dramatics over and over again, proving that they do not know how to govern the Republican Party. Just what? So they want to assume these leadership positions. They want to get into these high-ranking places in the government just to kind of steer the government down the drain. I think that's their very kind of true thing. They don't want the government to function, but they do want the power that comes from it. They love that. They love the power. Very frightening stuff, Linda. And just to kind of jump into some of these things that you highlighted. So with these social programs, particularly SNAP, food stamps that you covered, it's just so sad to think about these things being limited to people that need to access them. I'm trying to add work requirements to these things that say basically if you don't work, then you don't get to eat. In terms of using these food programs that the government provides assistance for. I mean, it is just so scary that we have a political party in the United States that is this extreme, that doesn't want to see the people of the country be able to access food unless they don't want to, or unless they don't conduct labor in a way that they see fit. It's just, the same kind of scary stuff that we've seen time and time again. We also saw that they're going to be ending this pause on student loan payments. I wanted to highlight that as well because I am very frightened of having to pay student loans back. When that comes up, that'll be my first time having to pay student loans as somebody who graduated not too long ago. Feels like kind of a world since that happened. But just to think about all of the people that are going to have to deal with these implications from the extremists that are running the Republican Party, and that they want to see a future for this country that leaves more people economically insecure, economically frustrated, is just so sad.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such an important point that you made about SNAP and the fact that these work requirements, what they're going to do in the end is get a lot of people caught up in bureaucratic red tape where even if they are working, if you just don't fill out the right form or it gets processed wrong or something, you can lose the food that you need to survive. And so it's funny how Republicans are the ones who are always railing against government, but they're the ones who are putting government in a negative way, intrusive things that are unnecessary, red tape into people's lives. And so it's really just so hypocritical. And these work requirements particularly are going to target people in their early 50s who they're extending work requirements to them. And these are folks in a lot of cases who are maybe disabled, even if they don't qualify for Social Security disability. The bar for that is very high, or they're providing care for their elderly relatives, or they've been pushed out of the workforce due to age discrimination, right? Like if you have a profession that's physically demanding, a nurse or a waitress or in a trade, and they tell you, oh, you need to be working even though you're in your late 50s, a lot of people's bodies can't do that anymore.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, Linda. Like, I think about my dad, he's a stagehand here in the unions in San Francisco. And just to think about him getting older and to think about like these government programs that are made to assist people like my father as they get older in life, as they're in these, as you said, physically demanding jobs. Like there is, I hate to say it, but there is, I don't want to say expiration date, but that is the phrase that comes to mind right now. But these are things that are draining and that people cannot do until the later years of their life. So these government programs are literally around to benefit and help protect American workers. And it's just so scary that like the Republican Party is again just waging a war against that. And Linda, like maybe you'll know more about this than I do, but I think about just like how we always kind of come back to the youngest generation. The younger generations are the most progressive that we've ever seen. Then why is it that the other side of that coin must be that the Republican Party is just so against their own voting base by targeting people that are older that would access these programs that are meant to benefit them, right? They're meant to benefit people as we get older. So I just can't understand. I don't want to say it's rooted in logic. It's rooted from kind of hatred. It's rooted from a belief in a lack of governance. But there just is no logic to this, why they'd want to harm their voting base in this way.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the right wing media infrastructure really comes into play. It's devoted to convincing people that things that are really attacks on them are actually just about attacks on other people instead, to make it look like, oh, only people who aren't like you rely on SNAP, when, it actually can be members of your own family, and that anyone could be in a position to need that assistance someday. And also, they just don't talk about this at all a lot of the time. And instead, they're distracting on their base with attacks on LGBTQ people and people of color.
Yeah, that's a great point, Linda. Yeah, and that reminds me too, like it is the first day of Pride Month as we are covering this, so I can't wait for some Pride content to hit Progress America Unfiltered. This is as good a time as ever to remind y'all at home, are you subscribed to the channel? Are you following us on TikTok? Come on now, you gotta be here for the content. But to get back to this debt ceiling discussion, it just seems like, that with the government expanding or delaying the debt ceiling, it raises into question a lot of the issues that were at the forefront of so many minds, like these social programs that are so important to the public, these things like student loan payments, just like the government's ability to govern, the government's ability to spend money, the government's ability to fall back on its debts, to pay its debts, to have validity to the United States dollar. Like all of these things are just very important. And Linda, I think you did a really great job of covering kind of the specifics here. But why do you think it is that it has spurred up so much kind of disarray within the Republican Party? I read a headline, and correct me if I'm wrong, before this, that more Democrats voted for Kevin McCarthy's bill than Republicans. So what is going on there?
Yeah, so there is a segment of the Republican Party that wanted to blow up the global economy on Joe Biden's watch. Like, that's the nihilist caucus. They don't care. And then I think there's another segment that's like, wait a minute, maybe voters might actually realize who's responsible and blame us, or maybe I have a stock portfolio or my donors do that might be impacted by this. And so I think it's just a question of who thinks that they have some level of responsibility, just to keep the global economy going and to not completely blow things up, and who just does not care because they're there to sow as much destruction as possible. And then, yeah, more Democrats did vote for it in the end than Republicans, but it passed overwhelmingly with over 300 members. And I think for Democrats, this was a genuinely difficult vote because it had, a lot of the bad provisions that we've been discussing, but at the same time, it's preventing default, which would be a real catastrophe, which could have delayed Social Security checks and things that people absolutely need. And so I think genuinely a really tough vote, and there were progressive champions on both sides of this, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez voted against it, Ilhan Omar and my own Congressman Jamie Raskin voted for it, and I can understand both of their decisions.
Definitely. It seems like it's a very nuanced kind of process. But definitely what we can say about it is that it was a big improvement on what we saw from the Default on America kind of MAGA proposal that we saw last month. So this is definitely, I think, imperfect, but it was imperfect with improvement for sure. And that's definitely somewhat reassuring. As it heads to the Democratic Senate, I imagine that it could only get better. I imagine. Linda, do you have any thoughts on that as
Yeah,
well?
so my guess, and we can find out in a few days if I'm right, is that it probably isn't going to change in the Senate at all. I
Mm.
think that at this point, Senate leadership is pretty concerned with making sure that this passes and gets to President Biden's desk in time to prevent a default, and that any amendments or anything that would make it have to go back to the House would only delay that. So we'll see, but that would be my guess. And so in the end, most likely, knock on wood, we're going to be preventing a default. But the question is just, did this deal have to be made in the first place, or should President Biden have used the options available to him to just say, no, this debt ceiling is unconstitutional, it should not exist, and I'm going to ignore it?
That's a great point. And yeah, as we said, it's June 1st. The deadline for this was June 5th. June 5th?
Yeah.
June 5th. So we are cutting it real close here. We are cutting it very close with these very big spending decisions for the United States government. And yeah, I mean, it just seems like, one of those things that we're just going to have to see what will happen next. Hopefully, it kind of remains drama free. President Biden signs this. But I guess we'll be following this story here and more on Progress America Unfiltered. Linda, I feel like we can keep this one fairly short and sweet because we have covered a lot in such a short amount of time. Is there anything else you want to say on this topic before we close out for today?
Yeah, the only other thing that I would add is that I think that, yes, there are some bad provisions in this deal, but that probably the most concerning thing about it is the precedent that it sets, that Republicans can take the debt ceiling hostage and that Democrats will be willing to negotiate when they do. And so they're going to come back next time and demand more cuts and keep roiling the global economy for no good reason. And so I think that since President Biden chose not to invoke the 14th Amendment, that Democrats really need to make eliminating the debt ceiling, which they can do through legislation, a major priority the next time that they have control of the White House and both houses of Congress. And if that's not the case when there's another debt ceiling fight, I hope that President Biden, if he still is in the White House at the time, will reconsider the 14th Amendment.
Absolutely. And our producer just wanted us to highlight as well that this only extends until January of 2025. So this fight is being punted down the road, but not so far down the road by any means in terms of the government's perspective, because as we know, the government tends to move very slowly. So this will be something we're hearing about very, very soon. And Linda, just one other topic that is just stirring up the nation right now that I've been paying so much attention to, and I didn't tell you this before that I was going to ask you about this, so this is a surprise. I was wondering, my friend that loves karaoke as well, have you seen the new Little Mermaid movie?
I did. I was impressed. Have you seen
I loved it? Yeah,
Yeah,
no, it was
I went
great.
in. I was a little skeptical just of mostly the additional half-hour length. I thought, it's already just such a perfect movie. What do they need to add more for? But I thought a lot of the new material was actually really good, especially to flesh out Prince Eric, make him a real character and a perfect match for Ariel. And I thought the acting was great. They did the songs justice. So it was a lot of fun, and I recommend it. What did you think?
Oh my, I just totally loved it. It was just like one of those movies that served as like the perfect break from reality. Like we hear about all this drama with the debt ceiling, we hear all about this, but it was just like a good, I guess, hour and a half of just like pure bliss and enjoyment. And like I brought my mom to see it, right? And so during Part of Your World, which Halle Bailey absolutely crushed, like of course that's when my mom chooses to go through her purse to find her red vines, like in the middle of it. So it's like the dramatic part of the song, and then you just hear my mom just like shuffling through her bag, and I was like, Mom, like I kind of tapped her shoulder. I was like, watch the screen, and she goes, what? And I'm like, come on, it's the best part of the movie.
Yeah, there was like at least 20 minutes until that song started, so she had time.
Yeah, she had time for the red vines. But Linda, thanks for humoring me about that. And thanks so much for this discussion of the debt ceiling. It was definitely a really important one. And I think with that, we're good to close out. So thank you all so much for watching. Make sure to like, share, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. We want to hear down below in the comments what you think of this whole discussion. What do you think of The Little Mermaid as well? Heck, tell us it all. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Linda, for joining, and have a good one. Bye.